Estate Communications Group. On behalf of the Real Estate Publishing Group and the Illinois Real Estate Journal, I'm pleased to welcome you here to the 11th Annual Commercial Real Estate Forecast Conference.
Okay, let's shift to talk about the general metro economy. One of the trends that has occurred in the city is there's been some movement of headquarters from the suburbs downtown. United Airlines moving from Elk Grove to Willis Tower. We talked about Google Motorola Mobility. Recently, Hillshire Brands moving to the West Loop at 400 South Jefferson. And you know, it's interesting that if we're not seeing companies move their headquarters downtown, we're certainly seeing companies with offices in the suburbs put satellite offices downtown. What do you think is driving that trend, and do you think it's going to continue?
You know, I think if you look just generally at the economy, there's this enormous bifurcation of, you know, very highly paid people in the top quintile, and then, you know, very poorly paid people in the bottom quintile. And much of this development is driven by trying to attract those high-end, high-income earners at the top of the economic pyramid. You know, I don't think that's great for America in general, but as it relates to Chicago, we need to be cognizant of it. And you know, it's sort of irrelevant what their real estate costs are when they're attracting people who are being paid as much as those people generally are paid. You know, if there's a $10 a foot rent differential and an average employee occupies 225 square feet, and you're talking about another $2,250 a year. When you're paying a new associate at a law firm $120,000, or you know, a new accountant at Ernst & Young, you know, those costs are irrelevant. What you want to do is attract a great candidate pool for every open slot, and those young people want to live in this city. There's no better city in America to live in when you're 22 to when you're 32. There just isn't. And those people want to be downtown in apartment buildings. Additional inventory is great for our competitive advantages.
Right. So I want to get a little bit more on the Chicago economy, but then shift to the state. But let's start with the city first. You know, what about the Chicago economic environment kind of gives you some hope, and what are some areas of concern?
Well, obviously, you know, I think it's got a great diversified. You know, we have a super diversified economy in Chicago, and it's weathered the recession pretty well. You know, from my office at the Merchandise Mart, I look out over the Mart Drive and then down the river in a couple of directions, and it's incredible. There's like, you look out there and you think there's no better city in America. Then you think about the East Loop and the occupancy levels over there, and so much of that has been driven by apartment conversion from those previous office buildings and retail centers, now apartments. People want to live near Grant Park and Millennium Park. And then you look to the west of the city, the West Loop, and see all those apartment cranes. And those cranes are really building apartments. They're building residences and not so much office buildings. When you think about the center of the Loop and LaSalle Street, there's like this big dead zone, you know, where there's very low occupancy rates, and we're getting to a point where the landlords are not going to be able to afford to remortgage those buildings to pay the $60 or $70 or $80 or $90 or $100 a foot in concessions necessary to lure in tenants. And that, to me, is very scary. You know, the downtown core is being rebuilt as a, you know, as a massive residential setting, and not, you know, not driven by new jobs. And until we drive new jobs into the city, I think we're at risk of a stagnating economy and a very difficult real estate market, and more disturbing trends as well.
What role do you feel that the city should play in terms of economic incentives?
Well, I think the city needs to be aggressive, and I think it is being aggressive. But I think you know, probably more companies have moved to Chicago and Illinois to open up in the merchandise mart than any other building in the state. So I think I know what it takes to get people to move here, and get them to stay and expand once they arrive. And I think it's a very expensive game to try to lure those headquarters into the city from the suburbs or from around the country. We need an economic engine. You know, I personally, you know, I'm concerned because I have children. My children see their grandparents. I told you I moved here to be near Sheila's family. And those grandparents reinforce the lessons I want with my children. They shake, you know, they tell the kids, you need to shake the hand more firmly, look somebody in the eyes, repeat their name when they're, you know, when you're introduced to them. They reinforce those little lessons, but they also enforce more profound life lessons. It's better to win than to lose, but it's better to lose than to cheat. And it's really helpful to have somebody else telling your children those things. I want to be around to raise my grandkids. I'm not convinced that my children, when they go off to college, will return to Illinois. Are the job opportunities that exist here, the career opportunities here, as strong as they are in places like New York, or Charlotte, or London, or San Jose, or Boston, or Washington, D.C.? And that, to me, is the fundamental challenge for all of us. How do we create an economic environment that is going to lure our children back to Chicago? You go to Rush Street, State Street, 11 o'clock, it's so much fun. There's so much action. But those kids, they're from St. Louis. They're the children of people who grew up in Minneapolis. They're from families in Cleveland. You know, our kids who grow up here are going away to college because that's what kids do. They want to get away from their parents a little bit. 70% of kids who go to college get their first job in that college town. We need something to lure them back to Illinois. It has to be a thriving economy.
Well, let's take that a step further, and that is, you know, with regard to the state of our state, and you know, your thoughts in terms of what do we need to get our state fiscally on track.
Well, you know, we have declining taxable assets. We have declining taxable assets, whether that's our industrial base, which is declining tremendously, whether that's the value of our residential real estate, which is also declining. We have declining taxable assets, and we have rising taxes. And I do not study economics. I'm not an economics major, but I can tell you that if you have declining taxable assets and rising taxes, that is a recipe for disaster. It's a toboggan run into the ground. It's just a matter of time. So somehow we need to have more taxable assets so that we can spread the tax base and lower the taxes on all the rest of us who are already here.